People feel really disconnected from themselves. Over 70% of adults, they report chronic stress, chronic overwhelm, anxiety, burnout.
Personally, I've had a lot of health issues. I had really severe eczema as a child for 25 plus years, tried everything under the sun. Well, it didn't work and it got worse. My physical body goes into stress mode, cortisol goes up, and, I'll be noticing signs like my hair falling out in the shower a little bit more, or like my digestion being affected while I'm eating. I had to look at different options, and the opened my eyes. I was able to relieve that was to use it, which helped me express my emotions, and then my skin started healing. It's really the bridge for understanding the physical body and the mind is really the invisible blueprint. This has been talked about for thousands of years, and it's only now being more taken seriously. 80 to 90% of the time, patients get a lot better. Whether it's physical, emotional, mental, they notice a change, and it works 80% of the time.
Welcome, Dr. Jason Yuan, to Rooted in Wellness. I'm going to call you Dr. Jason. Something that you don't know is that I found your page on Instagram shortly after I enrolled to do my master's at the Quantum University. And I was so loved your content, which I really want to share with my community today. Just the relevance that you hold from not only being an ND, but just like using this functional root cause healing and how you connect that with energy healing and this really great integrative approach. So before we dive into that, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you so much, Mona. I'm really happy to be here. It's a pleasure.
And so, this podcast is really about ancient wisdom in our modern day world and how all of my listeners can become more rooted. This is rooted in their health, in themselves, in their life, and also in that inner wisdom that they have to heal their body. So to kick things off, I'd love for you to tell me, what are 2 or 3 things that help you feel really rooted in your health and your happiness?
Yeah, it's really twofold for me, Mona. And as you know, it's for me. I try to combine the mind with the body, the physical with the subjective, experiential. So number one, the body is the foundation for me. Just because personally, I've had a lot of health issues. As I know your story and kind of going through my own healing journey, we know how important it is. Just like um, not only diet, exercise, but for me, it's really my environment, which we were talking about. So keeping the energy hygiene of my space very clean, which is very important for my work because I teach this, right? So I try to practice what I teach. So sunlight, water, air, for me, that's really crucial. And then on the inside, I try to, of course, do contemplative practices, meditation, really get my mind straight, first thing in the morning before I wake up, and last thing I do before I go to sleep.
I love that. I'm going to borrow that energy hygiene. That's
Mhm.
brilliant. That's something it's probably the most important hygiene.
Yes, yes,
When
and I'm
you think
sure
about it,
something
right?
we'll talk about because that was really, really important for me in terms of helping myself.
Yeah. And so, I love a lot of the people who sit in your seat, they have these incredible healing journeys themselves. And I'm sure a lot of the work that you do with your patients is helping them recognize the things in their lives that are causing them to feel uprooted. And I don't know about you, but in my practice, a lot of people are using wellness as a checklist. And a lot of the things that they're doing are actually the things that are causing them to feel uprooted, whether it's the biohacking schedule or commitment to excellence that they're trying to find every day. But are you aware when you tap into specific things that are causing you to feel uprooted? What are those things?
Yeah, and I think you can resonate with this, Mona. In our day and age, like productivity has so many metrics, right? And we have the workaholics, we have people that want to, be even the healthiest they can be. But even that, and it's very much an extreme, where you can be almost doing too many things for your body all at
Mm.
once. And so, for me, when I start to feel uprooted, I go back to how I feel is my inner state of being, right? The first thing that gets thrown off is my emotions and my thoughts. And once that gets thrown off, my physical body goes into stress mode, cortisol goes up, and, I'll be noticing signs like my hair falling out in the shower a little bit more, or like my digestion being affected while I'm eating. So those are the simple things. And also because I practice energy work, that's really a foundation of
Mhm.
how we how I at least understand the connection between the mind and the body, I will physically feel not only my physical body being thrown off, uprooted, but energetically, what it feels like for me is like it's like congestion. It feels like this field around me, there's like mud, stickiness, it comes very heavy, so it's hard for me to, think and feel things clearly.
Stickiness is such a good word. The symptoms that you described are often symptoms that most people just we acknowledge them as being normal. If it's a little bit of extra hair falling out in the shower, if it's a feeling of feeling off, we often attribute that to feeling stressed or overwhelm or fatigue and it just being normal in today's day and age. So this is what excited me most about finding your work is the focus on energy and how if you could lead with your energy, how that drives your decision making throughout the day. And all of a sudden, healthy living, healthy habits become you because you're so attuned to what your energy needs. So we're going to dive into all of that. But to kick off, we're also going to do just a few rounds of rapid fire questions because I want to get a glimpse deeply into some modalities that you use. So the first one is one energy tool or practice that you swear by.
One energy tool that I swear by is salt showers or salt bath. It's salt. Sodium chloride is very good at removing the congestion off of your body, the heavy energy, and then water kind of washes it off. So when I say energetic hygiene, that's one of the best things I recommend. Yeah.
And do you just keep a jar of salt in the shower if you're showering, not having a
Yes.
bath?
Yes. So for those that don't have a bathtub, I usually mix it with my body wash. So a handful of salt.
Mhm.
You could buy salt scrubs too, but I like to use the real thing. Yeah.
Make your own. Yeah,
Yeah.
so much more
Mhm.
affordable. All right, next, what's a healing modality that you think is underrated?
Well, I am biased, as you know. So, energy healing, or what science calls biofield therapies, which again, working on your energy, which helps your emotional and physical body.
I love it. And do you have a go-to song or even a sound that supports you in lifting your vibration?
Mm, I will have to say, like the mantra Om is very nice,
Mm.
simple, easy for me. I find that even in my meditation practices, I try to focus on not only the sound of Om, but the space or the gap between each Ohms. In that sense, tends to ground me and keep me in a clear space.
Oh, I love that. Do you know that I'll chant Om in my car to myself, especially before a big podcast or something like that?
Oh, yeah, we're weirdos like that.
Yeah,
I do
we're
it all
weirdos
the
like
time
that.
too. Yeah.
Exactly. I see you. You're my people. Okay, what is one book or teacher that deeply shaped your understanding of energy?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And that's really how I got here. So I practice an energy healing modality called pranic healing, and the Satguru or the
Mhm.
teacher is Master Choa Kok Sui, who has the same birthday as the founder of Reiki. So they come from the same lineages. So
Wow.
pranic healing is just a little bit more older, I mean, newer. Reiki was, early 1900s, pranic healing 1980s, 1990s when it was first founded. So that's where a lot of the information I know about energy healing and also like consciousness meditation comes from that. So that was my
Beautiful.
teacher. Yeah.
I love that. I didn't know that. I've got to look that up. What's a misconception about energy healing that you wish people would drop?
That it's all in your mind, and I'm happy to talk about the science later, but you know as our understanding of what the human body is and the multifaceted multidimensional aspects of health,
Mm.
we're starting to understand that consciousness drives this energy in the body, and although we can't measure it just yet using scientific instruments, we see it clinically, with a lot of studies with different patients like that.
Mm. Ah, I want to elaborate, but we're going to talk about that. Last one. What's the most surprising thing energy healing has taught you about the body?
That's a great question. I think the most surprising thing energy healing has taught me about the body is something, ancient civilizations have talked about for thousands of years. Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine, it's all connected, right? The mind, body, spirit, it's all connected. And the energy, what I find is that it's really the bridge for understanding the physical body and the mind. Because for me, when I work on patients, and you can ask other healers as well, it's very physical for me. Some
Mhm.
people might be able to see energy, but for me, it's very much a tactile sensation. And when I work on people, they get better. So that's how it connects back for me.
Absolutely. All right. This is a good segue then when we think about, the symptoms that people feel today. So let's just say in a world where, you know, Over 70% of adults, they report chronic stress, chronic overwhelm, anxiety, burnout. This is so familiar to me. People feel really disconnected from themselves and their energy, and often can't even attune to this concept of what their energy is. And yet, here we are, these ancient healers that you were just describing, they spoke about this. They spoke about feeling the same imbalance thousands of years ago, but not as disease and instead as blocked energy within the body, right? So let's start there. When we say energy healing, what does that actually mean today?
Yeah, so I can give you sort of the history, and then I'll kind of jump into the science modern interpretation. In energy, we have the word prana, as you know, in Ayurveda, the Vedas in
Mhm.
Indian traditions. You have the word chi, right, in traditional Chinese medicine, and all of it basically implies that there is this substance, right, this invisible substance that tends to drive not only the health of the physical body, but also the clarity of your emotions and your thoughts. So, acupuncture, right? One of the oldest forms of energy medicine, right? Crazy to think about using these tiny needles, sticking it in different points on your body. And what is it
Yeah.
supposed to do? It's supposed to clear stagnant energy. Because in acupuncture, health is defined as free flow of chi and blood, right? Energy and blood. So if you move the energy, the blood will move, and hence your physical body will get better. And I'm also an acupuncturist myself, and that's sort of for me understanding, the doors of what this energy really means. And then, translating to the modern context, we call energy healing biofield therapies. Okay. Bio meaning life. Field is this invisible field of energy and information, which connects to quantum physics, because we understand that what this is trying to do at the end of the day, when I tell people, okay, I'm removing stagnant energy out of your field. What does that mean? It basically means it's bringing your body back to coherence. Okay.
Mm.
So realistically, I'm not the one doing the healing on you, and you've heard that yourself. The body has this built-in intelligence where if you remove the traffic, the stuck energy in the body, in the field, the body will heal much better than, without it. So that's what biofield therapies talk about. And there's dozens of different
Mhm.
energy healing practices, of course, and they each do it in their own unique way. But the consensus is to bring back coherence to this field, because this invisible field serves as the blueprint for your physical body and your emotions and your thoughts. So the better the blueprint, the better the rest will be.
Do you not still feel that it's so wild with everything that we know around the body's energy and the fact that we refer to energy work as alternative healing, when throughout history all of our ancestors recognize this as primary healing? And in fact, it was actually something that was quite sacred. You know this, obviously. I remember when I started to first learn about things like yoga and Reiki and stuff like that, you ask for permission from the other person to be able to enter to work on their energy. It's not something that anyone can do. And it's like this unwritten knowingness of wisdom between two biofields that can then come together in coherence. And this is where quantum healing is really powerful, because we know about things like entanglement and how two biofields can actually join together, and the power of one positive energy being able to feed or soothe the other. And I really wish that we could change that lens. And let's take that a step further, because I can imagine now, with all of these words, a lot of listeners who may not have experienced energy healing in the past. Can we describe to them what's actually happening? So what's actually happening when you're working with someone's energy in their biofield?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's a question I have to tell not only my patients but also my colleagues, right? Because
Yeah.
it is so new, but quote unquote, but it, like you said, it's very old. It's probably the oldest form of medicine that we understand, and it very simply, the way I describe it is, think of our bodies like a phone, right? So we have a phone here. So we have the physical, tangible phone that I can touch and feel. But within this phone, right, we have Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, cellular, and there's fields, right? There's electric magnetic fields, right? So without this field, we would not be able to communicate, through the internet and, send texts and watch videos.
Yeah.
Basically, what happens is, when I do energy healing, the simplest concept I can tell people is that disease comes up in two ways, two very simple ways. Number one, energetic deficiency. All right. So your body, when you're tired, you run down, long day at work, your battery is going to be low on your phone, right? So if you're at 1%, you're not going to be able to play those games or applications, watch videos at its maximum capacity, right? Because it's just low on battery. So energetic deficiency. Now that's not as common. The most common one I find is energetic congestion. Okay. So if you have
Mm.
enough battery in your phone, right, your body, but what's happened is that you might have like a software bug or you have a hardware bug, right? And something is happening where, your applications are crashing. Okay. It's not really because of the phone's fault. There's just something you might have picked up, downloaded an app that might not be too good, or picked up from someone else's messages or downloads. And that's energetic congestion. So what I mentioned is like traffic on the highway. And how that shows up for me is very physical. Again, that's the most basic way to interact with this energy. For me, is like I feel it. So it's warmth, texture, like a magnetic feeling, and there's a quality to it. And the way I describe it again is like mud. It's like heavy. It feels like something is stuck and not moving. And
Mhm.
very simply, what energy healing does is to bring coherence, right? At the end of the day, let's bring this phone back to full charge. Let's remove the software bugs and let's allow the operating system to operate what it was originally intended to work as. So for me, going back to energetic hygiene, and this is where it connects back to it, is we basically go with the idea of Jenga. Okay. So in Jenga, you take a piece out of the tower. So basically, we're going to take pieces or that stuck energy out of the body. Okay. So remove what's not supposed to be there and then replace it with good energy, right? The pieces that are supposed to
Mm.
be there. And just by doing that, for me, 80 to 90% of the time, patients get a lot better, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, they notice a change. And how that
Mhm.
works and how science currently interprets it is, again, this biofield, if you restore coherence, somehow, some way, it's communicating through the body, through, biophotons, epigenetics, whatever. There seems to be a cascading effect, right? A top-down effect. You change the blueprint, and as that blueprint changes, the physical and the emotional, mental bodies start to improve. That can happen within seconds, minutes, or the next day.
It's a phenomenal concept when we think, gosh, if, this Eastern medicine had really just stayed consistent throughout history, what a different approach we would have towards this symptomatic treatment that we're exposed to. And I think the closest thing that we're getting to in terms of where the science is right now, and tell me if you agree with this, but all the science that's coming out around the power of our body's mitochondria, not just specific to one area, but the interconnectedness of mitochondria from your toes communicating to the top of your brain and back and forth. And the same thing with our lymphatic system and the flow that comes through that. So I feel like Western medicine is really trying to put the words or the languaging behind something that we might not understand. But to your point, if you've experienced energetic healing, you felt a shift. And maybe it's something as simple as going to a yoga class or a meditation class or a qigong class or going for an acupuncture session where you can't quite describe it, but there's been a shift that allows you to feel a sense of freedom just for a few moments. So I really want listeners to take that away. First of all, if you haven't experienced any of those Eastern modalities, please go seek it. Go seek it with consistency so that you can feel a shift, but also understand that maybe it's time for you to stop treating the specific system or symptom and start to acknowledge, well, what is it connected to? And the other thing that you brought up too, in terms of like the deficiency versus congestion, which I love, congestion doesn't necessarily happen overnight. So when you're working with your patients, are you kind of working on a timeline as well? Thinking back to the last time they did have more flow or efficiency or coherence within the body, because in yoga and Ayurveda, we talk about congestion as things that kind of build up, things that accumulate within the body until the body responds with an actual physical or acute symptom.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it connects back to acupuncture, but again through the modality that I practice, pranic healing, which takes it to another level, which is that 90% of the time, if you have any pain in the body. Let's just use pain, right? Because that's really simple. We understand that pain can be acute, right? You just, hit your knee on the table, right? That's very recent, to you've had chronic knee arthritis for 10 plus years. So that level of congestion will vary. So there's definitely going to be a spectrum. So, from my experience, it's of course much easier to work on something that's new than something that's been hanging out for a decade. And for me, it's objective too, because I feel the difference when I pass my hand. Again, I tell people, like, whether you believe in it or not, you can get trained in energy healing. And one of the easiest ways to confirm objectively for oneself is to use your hand as like a metal detector, right? So I feel
Mm.
the congestion or the depletion in that area of the body. And for someone that had a recent acute injury, it's going to feel like something's off, but it's not too bad. Versus someone that's had knee arthritis for a decade, it's going to feel really heavy, really sticky. And, when I try doing the techniques, it might take, not only several weeks, but several months to kind of work through that, just because how long it's been there.
Mm. Have you done much studying around heart math and heart coherence?
Yes, I'm aware of it. I'm not an expert, but I'm definitely aware of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you've shared quite a bit actually as an educator when you're speaking around the energy that's emitted just from the heart and the brain alone, and how that's connected to the shift in our emotions and even our intention and our biofield. So when we think about this moving out into the world, how do you describe to your patients who might have hesitation going back out into this modern world, which is busy, which is congested, which is dysregulated, and kind of, not undoing the work that you do with them to hold that spiritual space within them?
Yeah, well, that's like the $1 trillion question.
Yeah.
Because if I could do that, I would be there. And
As I
it
see you hold up your cell phone too, it's like, ah,
Yes, yes, because this is a trap for me too,
yeah,
because I can go down my own rabbit hole, and as you know, creating content online, it does feel like you're on a hamster wheel, and I try to be mindful not to be uprooted by my own practice, right,
yeah.
by what I'm trying to teach. So again, it's really twofold. For me, you have the inner work and then the outer work. So the outer work is easy, right? It's something you can see, feel, it's something you can measure, like how many minutes you run on the treadmill, how many minutes meditate, your diet, just having good
Mhm.
relationships, things like that. So that's something I try to keep as a foundation. And again, this connects back to a concept that mainstream medicine is trying to push for, called whole person health. And I'm sure you've heard of that, which is the integration of not only, biological systems, right? Your heart, your lungs, your lymphatic system, but aspects of your social relationships, right? Your spiritual beliefs and how that comes into play. Because, patients that see me half an hour at the office once a week is not going to change their lives. It's everything
Yeah.
outside of, that office visit. So for me, what I try to do is try to remind them that, there's all these other dimensions to health, which connects back to the inner work, right? So how you deal with certain triggers that comes up with coworkers, right? How your character is. So character is very important for me too, because your character is also a reflection of your energy, right? Someone that is angry, jealous, right? Their energy is going to be thrown off. Their biofield is going to be thrown off. As you know, with the Heart Math Institute and what they talk about coherence too, right? Heart HRV, right, is going to be off as well. So we try to, again, this concept of coherence is a very good term. It's very simple, but it ties both in the physical, the emotional, and the mental. So that's what I try to teach people, is try to do practices that brings your HRV up, which is a reflection of your nervous system being more regulated, and you're more in that rest and recovery versus the fight or flight.
Oh, that's such a good point. Yeah, I feel like wearables are becoming the way for people who might be stuck in that Western mentality to come over to the spiritual side or the energetic side without necessarily calling that. But that's a really good point that you brought up. So to go back to that interconnectedness, when I was studying Ayurveda and yoga, we talk about the five koshas. So there's layers to our being. It's our physical being, it's our emotional being, our mental, our energetic, and our spiritual. how on earth can we talk about a healing protocol that doesn't incorporate all parts of us, right? And yet we're so in the Western world stuck on our physical body, our physical symptoms. So, do you see a place for energy work at hospitals in the future? I always talk about this dream of actual integrative healthcare. Maybe let's put it through a question like this. How can we help somebody who's stuck in the physical symptomatic approach understand that there could be another aspect or kosha that's actually out of harmony?
Mm. Yeah, and I would say that experience is the best teacher, as you know, Mona, right? You
Mhm.
can show them all the studies in the world that spirituality makes you live happier and longer, right? Energy healing helps with pain, but until they experience that for themselves, and that's why, I find that psychedelics seems to have, exploded this field very much so because
Yeah.
people are having these transcendental experiences, right? But you can't really, show on a petri dish. You can just scan their brains, but there's so much that has happened, right, in all these mystical experiences. So for me, I would say experience is the best teacher, in all different domains, like you've mentioned, the five koshas. And for me, again, my story is I had really severe eczema as a child for
Yeah.
25 plus years, tried everything under the sun, conventional Western medicine said was going to be helpful for me, but it did work until it didn't work and it got worse, right? So for me, I had to look at different options. And the energy work side opened my eyes because for me, my eczema wasn't physically like the origin wasn't physical, it was emotional, right? And how I was able to relieve that was to use this energy work, which helped me express my emotions, and then my skin started healing. So that's why it wasn't working. And again, for anyone else with eczema, it could be completely different. But until you
Yeah.
try it for
Right.
yourself, this is why I say it's not energy healing is not going to do everything for you, but at least test it and see, right? As a true scientist, come to your own conclusion, right, with any of these recommendations and see if it helps. And for me, it helped. And that's why I try to teach about it.
Yeah, your story is incredible. Like healing yourself from lifelong eczema and suffering, where I think most people at that point would have prescribed to, steroid creams or whatever it is that they needed to ease their suffering. And I know a lot of parents are going to listen to this podcast too, who have children who experience eczema. And of course, we don't want our kids to suffer. And maybe there is a time and a place to give the cream or the antibiotic ointment if it turns into some sort of an infection, but understanding the root cause of it. And I'll be fully honest to this audience. My daughter even recently has eczema, and I'm questioning where it came from. I actually took her for like some energetic muscle testing around food allergies, and there was absolutely nothing. But we just moved and she went into a new school and she had a lot of anxiety around it. And the dates literally correlate completely. And I think it's important to tell stories like yours, to still tell stories about this root cause healing, because when we operate from a place of fear or suffering, we'll do whatever it takes. I know when I was sick, I wanted the prescription, just I took the surgery, just whatever it takes to ease my suffering. I do not want to get to the root cause now. But there is a better way. And it's all of these stories that we really need to go viral in order for people to really trust that to move in this way of energy is really powerful. And while we're on this topic, I'm curious too, because fasting is having a moment right now. And I'm a big proponent of fasting. And fasting is also an ancient ritual practiced amongst different cultures globally since the beginning of time. However, I also believe that if you're doing some sort of extended type of a fast and you're not dealing with the energetic body first, or any of that nervous system regulation or emotional trauma that could be stored within, you're actually just purging from a place of stress rather than purging from a place of actually giving your body liberation. What do you think about fasting right now?
Yeah, for me, fasting is very interesting because, as you've highlighted, it's around for thousands of years in so many different traditions. And for me, I try to balance both the Eastern and Western mind,
Yeah.
very, very mindfully, and sometimes it's tough to do that. But because I look at more from the perspective of consciousness and energy, what fasting does for me when I look at it is that it helps us detach from our attachments, right? We're
Mm.
we're creatures of habit, right? So we wake up, We have breakfast, we have lunch, we have dinner, right? We rinse and repeat. Um, but there's a merit to stopping that temporarily because it brings you back to, okay, what's the point of this? What's the point of fasting? And fasting really teaches you to have agency over your lower nature, right? The lower nature of your stomach, right? Which wants to be fed, the lower nature of maybe your sexual organs for pleasure and different things like that. So for me, that's the first thing I think of because energetically, I think of the energy centers and the chakras and how they have the dual aspect, right, of both, physical
Yeah.
and the psychological component there. But with that being said, I do think fasting is very helpful, at least for everyone, intermittent fasting, because there's a lot of data and research there, and we're not meant to be eating 24/7 anyways.
Exactly. Yeah.
And when I work on people's energy fields, when they do fast, it's almost like it becomes clearer, right? It's like their body's doing a reset, so I don't have to do as much work.
Absolutely. And I know I have a lot of fasters listening to this as well. So, all I have to say is the next time you commit to some sort of a fast or a cleanse, merge that with energy healing. How many times, gosh, I can think of so many client stories where after a Reiki session, after a yoga class, after some sort of like somatic work that they've done, they leave immediately and they're urinating nonstop, or they have an amazing bowel movement as well, which just goes to show the potential of the body to further release what doesn't serve you. So thank you for that reflection. Some of the videos that you have that I love is you're really educating your audience on what we're finally seeing. It's that, quantum biology and neuroscience are finally validating what ancient wisdom has known all along. And this is like the power of our thoughts on our body and our symptoms, the power of the emotions that we feel every single day on our health overall, and of course those electromagnetic frequencies that you talked about, but how these thoughts and emotions literally communicate at a cellular level to our body. What excites you about this convergence and awareness that's coming out in education?
Yeah, and I think that I do this because it's helped me, right? And as I say, personal experience is the best teacher because um as challenging as our lives might be, right? The physical health issues that we both went through, Mona, right?
Yeah.
There's always the bright side to it. And now we're in a position to educate and help others. And I say the same because, what this really points towards is that our reality is not just physical, right? Our reality has a new factor, which is consciousness, right? And if consciousness comes in, which can sound kind of woo-woo, which, again, people in New Age call it co-creating this reality together. Well, there's some truth to that. And like you said, this has been talked about for thousands of years, and it's only now being more taken seriously, thanks to research on meditation and psychedelics, and now, energy healing, which is, where attention goes, energy flows. And not only for me, how I see it is like, how can I explain to someone by not touching them, right, physically, I'm able to help with their pain, right? And it works 80% of the time with me. Um, and then how can you tell other people that have mystical experiences, right? Maybe not even taking psychedelics, having meditation, right? Going out of our body and
Mhm.
connecting with entities that are intelligent and feeling this interconnection and these recurring themes of love and unity and being connected and guided, right? And the recurring thing that we chose to be here, right? Which has again talked about in Buddhism and Hinduism. So I think that this is really exciting because this is the core unifying theme for not only health but humanity, right? And if we take seriously like our thoughts and our emotions and its impact not only on us but on the world, right?
Mhm.
Because if we have a bad philosophy for ourselves, right? If we don't give ourselves self-love and that care and that intention, which I've struggled with being a people pleaser and then leaving
Yeah.
myself the short
Yeah.
end of the stick, right? That bad philosophy is reflected onto the world. So again, bad people aren't bad. It's just that they haven't, got to the point of healing those root causes. So
Mhm.
and I say that with humility, right? Because I know that I'm in a very fortunate position, and there's a lot of challenging situations going on in the world. But if you can cultivate self peace, right, peace within yourself, that will be translated to world peace, right, and that's the goal.
Absolutely. When we think about our nervous system too, right? If our nervous system is electricity and the power of our energy we consider as electricity, and if we teach ourselves how to master our own nervous system, master our own energy, we take that out into the world. And so, gosh, I said, I think on every podcast, I always ponder, imagine if we were taught this as kids, if we were taught that the power of our words were to become our reality, that the power of our energy was going to dictate the choices that we make every single day, then it wouldn't be right now about us having this conversation about being woo woo or not. It would just be like a known fact about humanity. And I think that we're getting there. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's definitely very embodied, as you said, and
Yeah.
whether we talk about our nervous system, the biofields, right? These electrical signals, coherence, HRV, right? They're just ways of explaining the internal reflection to the external. So that's why, yeah, I'm a big proponent of. At the end of the day, my goal is to make people kinder, more pro-social, right,
Yes.
and to do good in the world.
So I can imagine that with your growing platform, there's also a lot of skeptics that might tune in and maybe they think that energy is just a placebo. Um, but we now know the placebo isn't fake, like it's actually a documented reality. So for people who are skeptics that maybe don't believe that healing can happen through belief, how do you explain to them? How do you explain to your patients who are just curious but still unsure?
Yeah,
You
and
mentioned
that's
experience.
yeah, experience. It's very interesting, right? Because as you know, Mona, when you take a drug, right, you might not feel the drug, and it might be working. Or when you take a drug, you'll feel it, and you'll think it's
Mhm.
working. And the same thing with energy healing and biofield therapies. Some people, I describe like some people's physical body, their hardware may not be as sensitive to the energy, right? Even though they're not
Mhm.
as sensitive, it doesn't mean that they can't feel it. And but for other people, they're super sensitive, right? And you have those empaths. You just put them in a room of people, and they feel like they're picking up on everyone's emotions.
Mm.
So, this goes into the placebo again. If you subscribe to the theory that where attention goes, energy flows, right? Just having that expectation, that positive mindset, that even an open mind, right? That there might be something possible, a positive outcome, right? That automatically changes your field to be more receptive to this healing practice.
Mhm.
And one of the core things I tell patients is that in the very first time you get energy healing done, the most important thing is to be receptive, to be open minded, to not have any preconceived ideas, because with that sense, right, you're not expecting anything, right, but you're open to it. And when I work on someone that has that mindset, it becomes a lot easier. It's like I'm not fighting them, right? They're not holding on to, certain habits and patterns and energies like that. And this connects back to the placebo effect because we're understanding that consciousness is very strange, right? And it's quantum. It has effects just by asking the question, right? Framing an experiment, right? Designing the question will affect the answer, right? So
Mhm.
I think that placebos in everything, and with energy healing, very specifically, it's been tested against placebo, especially Reiki for mental health, and Reiki works better than placebo in a majority of the cases. If the
Mhm.
studies are well designed, even with sham Reiki practitioners, right, being in front of you and pretending to do Reiki, the real Reiki beats out the sham
Yeah.
Reiki. So that again shows like there's something there. Of course, we don't understand it, but the placebos, it's the placebo. If it works, why not, use it too? And I don't think it should be vilified.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's the openness. And I think we're at a time and a place in history where people are finally perhaps becoming more open out of necessity, because a lot of people are doing all the right things on paper, but they're still not feeling their best. And for anyone who might be questioning this concept of energy work, put it through a different lens. When you walk into a room and it feels right, when you meet a certain friend and it's like, they're not your people versus somebody else, you're like, oh my gosh, I found my people, right? And over time, maybe there's a community that you're part of, or a religious or a spiritual aspect of a community that you're part of. When you're in that gathering together, I'll call it Sangha together, um, you feel a lift in consciousness. right? And that lift in consciousness is actually related to our chemistry and biology. So, if you're somebody who's not necessarily open to the word energy, but you're open to the word religion or spirit, it's a different lens describing this consciousness within us. So, do you see the role of consciousness now? There's a lot of buzz around the rising of consciousness right now. Do you see that as playing a role in healing outcomes?
Yeah, and I can definitely consciousness plays a role in healing outcomes, and I can give you some really concrete examples to explain to the audience, right? So there's been studies done at MD Anderson Cancer Center, right, which is the number one cancer research center in the United States, and they're doing studies on energy healing. Okay, and they're not doing it on people, but they're doing it on petri dishes with cancer cells and on mice. But what's the unique thing is they have this healer, right, and they've using this energy healing modality, non-contact, repeated it dozens of times, and it showed that energy healing was able to decrease cancer proliferation. I think these were pancreatic cancer cells, which, pancreatic cancer is one of the most aggressive cancers, and not a lot of treatments do too well with it. So that goes to show, like, how does, and this was versus a sham, right? And so how does that happen? And it's
Yeah.
statistically significant. And what was cool, Mona, is that they also hooked him up to brain scans, measuring his brain waves, right, using EEGs, and they measured the changes of calcium within those cancer cells. Now, for the audience that doesn't understand calcium in cancer, so the higher the levels of calcium, right, the more prolific the spread, the metastasis of the cancer tends to be. So
Mm.
at the same time, the energy healer's brainwaves synchronized to a certain pattern, the calcium levels in those cancer cells started to drop, right? So that was like a two-way finding. So it was very interesting. So does it show
Fascinating.
causality?
Mhm.
Maybe. Of course, science is very, they walk on eggshells when they talk about this stuff, but it shows like
Mm.
consciousness affecting outcomes, right? And if you think about that, right, how does that apply to us on a daily basis, right? Our thoughts when we're just, if someone has cancer or someone has a different type of condition, just based on your relationship to it, right? How you think, how you feel about your own condition has an effect. So the studies
Absolutely.
out of there are very interesting. Yeah.
So deep down, I'm such a nerd at heart. And I really believe that the future is about fiber and frequency. I truly do. Like, these were the two biggest things for my healing that I experienced at the ashram. And I love that these studies are coming out around cancer cells and how you can literally just see in that petri dish that you described the shift of a cell. Like, you can look at a cell under a microscope and literally see something like free radical damage that goes from looking like this spiked, jagged cell into something that comes into this beautiful round, solitude space again, or something that merges with other blood cells in coherence again. These are the things that need to go viral. Like, people need to see the impact of these things to understand the power of frequency, the power of sound, the power of music, of chanting, of sound bowls, and all of these things and vibrations. So, could we really simplify healing if we believed that? Because going back to that placebo effect that you mentioned, what if it all had to do with your belief system? What if you could truly believe that your habits every day and your rituals were going to heal you? I think that the power of that could instantly bring on a healing effect with practice over time. And there's lots of practitioners out there that speak about this. You've probably read Quantum Healing by Deepak Chopra. He's just, one of the founding doctors to kind of put this energy work onto the table, especially through the lens of cancer. Do you use frequency healing at the office?
Yeah, frequency is very interesting, right? Because as you mentioned, there's so many applications of what we call frequency healing, sound healing, and I know like biofield tuning. People use tuning
Yeah,
forks and singing
tuning
bowls,
forks. Yeah.
and I know the research there is very robust in the terms of like mental health, and I know you mentioned Deepak Chopra, and he's very big on that quantum consciousness realm as well. For me, I work in an integrative space. They're a little bit more conventional, right? They're not as
Mhm.
open to all these other things. And I
There's no
try to
crystals at the office?
no, unless it's in my office. I'm the
Yeah.
only one crazy around. But with that being said, I do believe that medicine is moving more towards a truly integrative, holistic model where, even when we call energy healing alternative or, other modalities alternative, I don't think that that label will be there anymore, right? Because when we
Yeah,
move to the model of true whole person health and we understand that frequency, biology, social connections, right? Your environment, all that comes to play. Well, that's all part of the definition of health. So why do we need to label it alternative, right? If we have just this
absolutely.
one big integrative umbrella. So yeah, I am hopeful for that. And back to your question, the only frequency modalities I do is just energy healing on top of the acupuncture I do for people. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm curious, with your healing journey, would you attribute a spiritual aspect to that, like spiritual growth or dealing with your own spirit or congestion within your spiritual body as well?
Yeah, so that's really the root cause of it all for me, at least Mona, right? I think
Mhm.
I push the science so hard because I feel like I'm a closeted spiritual seeker, like all of us, in
Mhm.
different ways, of course, and I try to make the language very much easy to understand for both sides, for skeptics and for believers, and really for me, in as you know for yourself, right? I believe we're spiritual beings having a human experience, right?
Experience,
And
yeah.
quantum physics starting to show that, right? With consciousness and being at play. And it seems like with psychedelics, like outer body experiences, meditation, people seem to access this higher realm of consciousness, which again, these spiritual traditions, right, have been talking about for thousands of years. And that definitely resonates at my core. I think that uh, everything that we talk about from fiber, frequency, energy healing, it's all to make us whole and whole as in
Mhm.
body, soul, and spirit, where our soul can be manifested fully and completely and authentically in this lifetime to give and share what it was meant to do. And it's, passion, right? As you know, I don't know if you heard of Bashar, he talks about the formula,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
like the formula is very simple. Just live out your passion to the best of your ability and things will tend to work out. And I think that if more people live by that, and spiritually,
Mhm.
you don't even have to believe in a higher power, but as long as you're being authentic to yourself, I think that's a huge step forward for a lot of people. And because, and I'm sure you've seen celebrities, you can make it all the way to the top and you can feel so empty up there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Every single person at that level who might have achieved the financial freedom and the abundance and the experiences all come back to the fact that those weren't the things that caused them true happiness inside. And look, you and I are in this industry where it's so easy to get tempted to these dangling carrot solutions that Western medicine is providing us with, and the protocols and the new findings and stuff like that. But I'm always drawn back to spiritual healing. And for me, my healing today continues to be about my spirit. When I align with that, then all the healthy choices, eating correctly, drinking, sleeping, drinking water, that is, exercising, movement, sleep, they all become part of your DNA. And for my clients, it's the same. The ones who've had the most success, healing becomes a spiritual journey. And through that spirit, they can unlock the protocol for themselves that's unique to them, the things that they actually need to really thrive in this world and have fun and enjoy this human experience, as you said. Then it becomes really fun.
Yes, I have to agree, and you see it all, and I think that that dangling carrot that you talk about, like, I'm not perfect. I chase after it sometimes, and it tastes good when you have it, but
Yeah.
um, I try not to, especially making content online. I try not to fixate on the views and how it performs and things like that. But as long as, like you said, being happy, authentic to yourself, I feel like for health or your career or whatever, I think it tends to put you on the right path.
You got it. You're my people. I'm so happy I found you.
Thank you.
All right. For some people listening right now who have never tried energy healing, what are some simple few daily practices to start balancing their energy that you prescribe?
Yeah, so on top of the salt, um, using salt in the shower or in the bath, which is probably the primary thing I recommend. The other thing I recommend is grounding, right? So just being out in nature, feet on the grass, right? As we know, when we talk about, energy healing, biofield, these electromagnetic fields, right? We're talking about coherence. So for a lot of my patients, especially for those that have more chronic conditions, I tell them to, ground next to a strong, healthy tree, right? Because, if
Mm.
a strong tree is healthy, there's going to be good energy there. And as we know, there's different forms of energy. You have energy from the sun, from the air, from the ground, from the water. So that's what I talk about environment, right? That's so important for me. So being in a space that has good energy, physically, but also internally too. So not only eating the right diet and being in the right environment, but for me is really doing a meditation practice, because a meditation practice is energy work in itself, right? Being able to calm your mind brings your body back into coherence, and that's one of the
Mhm.
simplest ways. You could go to a healer, of course. You can learn to do it, which is probably the best thing. But the core practice of energy healing comes from a filter. So me as a practitioner, I'm a filter. So if I'm all messed up from emotional
Good point.
charges from today, I'm not going to be as best as I can be for that client or patient. So,
Oh, that is such a good point. Yeah, finding a teacher, but a teacher that really is aligned with their teachings, right? I think that's so important. And you brought up something interesting around diet. Let's dive into this for a second. I know that you're trained as a naturopathic doctor, but also in acupuncture. And I found a traditional Chinese acupuncturist who was a game changer for me, my health, especially through hormonal changes. And I love that she could also talk to me about the energy in food. So, can you describe a little bit about how you educate your patients around the energy in what they're eating to support their body's qi?
yeah, and it's really simple, Mona. And what I love about Chinese medicine or Ayurveda is they have these concepts already built into it. So it's like you're not talking to a three-legged alien sometimes, which is what I have to deal with some of my colleagues. But very simply, things that are organic, made from nature, grown from the ground, you can measure. Again, when you get trained in energy work or other modalities, you can feel the energy, and it feels not only more substantial, more stronger, but it's cleaner, right? And again, it resonance, right? What you put in your body is what your body will reflect. So whole foods, green leafy vegetables, colorful berries, that's definitely something I recommend for everyone, because not only does it have the antioxidants, but I know as an energy worker, I know what it does to the field. So that's number
Mhm.
one. And again, on the reverse side, on the opposite side of the coin, avoid things that are synthetic, manufactured, boxed up, put in a wrapper. Because again, nutritionally, from objectively, it might have certain calories, macros, micros, but energetically, it feels like it's barely alive. It's like your battery is at 1%. So that's
Mhm.
really, again, might be nutritious for the body from a conventional perspective, but long term, as you know, when we talk about stagnation, right? If you eat things that are heavier and not good for your body, that will build up, and that's where I really think energy work is really the invisible blueprint, right? So if you can see things from this eye, right? Oh, everything has energy, and not only the nutritional value, but the quality of the energy that you put into your body there.
I love that frame. What is the food that you're eating doing to your field?
Yes.
What a beautiful concept. Yeah, I often describe as that like ultra processed foods as packaged dead food. You can just feel it. Like there's no life force energy to it whatsoever. It's not to say that I don't consume it sometimes. Like I love things like crackers, even if it's a really healthy cracker, but it's dead food. Like there's no vibrancy to it whatsoever versus eating something that's really, really colorful. And we talk at the ashram about food having prana. That
Mhm.
prana, that energy is literally feeding energy to the cells in every single part of your body. And when we start to have that lens around nutrition, then it becomes a no brainer around the type of energy that you want to feed yourself. So that's a beautiful lens. Thanks.
Mhm.
Something you'd mentioned also is, you said grounding. So can I get your thoughts on yes or no grounding mats? Are you pro or is it hype?
I think it's grounding mats are in the middle for me. Of course, if someone that used to live in Canada, right, it's not the most productive thing to be out there in the snow, putting your feet there. Although there's incentive for ice baths and things like
Yeah.
that. But I do find grounding mats. It's funny because I was just recommending it to one of my patients who is on their cancer care journey, a grounding mat because they physically don't have
Mm.
access, can move. So I find that again, grounding again restores this, bioelectric electromagnetic field around our body to simulate what it's like to be in nature. But the best would be to be out in nature next to a strong healthy tree. And
Mhm.
for me, that's a really important practice because that's like a reset for me. And trees are like the
Absolutely.
earth's lungs, right? So they're filtering in and out just like our bodies.
Absolutely. And what about EMF blockers?
Yeah, for that, I think it's that for me gets very nuanced because I know a lot of
Yeah.
people talk about that and there's certain science and the technology to it. I think it's a useful idea. For me, it's not as much as a priority. For me, what I try to preach about is agency, right? So, instead of wanting someone to fish for you, you can fish for yourself. So
Yeah.
restoring your field back into harmony, right? Because we're going to be we're walking constantly walking in, fields that are maybe not as constructive for our biology. So it's all about coming back and recentering yourself and restoring the field. But I think there's merit to it. I just don't know the science of it that well, just
Yeah.
to recommend it. Yeah.
I'm with you. And like wellness and supplements and all of these things, whenever something starts trending, there's so many companies out there that are launching, and it's really tough to decipher which are actually working for you or not.
Mhm.
So good tip. Um, if there's somebody who's listening who really wants to start assessing their energy if it's out of alignment, do you notice, has there been ever any consistent symptoms from the patients that walk into your office? You and I talk about never ignoring the whispers before they turn into screams. Are there some common, subtle symptoms that represent energy blockage?
Yeah, the most common ones I see is really it tends to be expressed through people's emotions. So the way I explain this to people, Mona, is like first you have the energy, right? The energy affects your thoughts, right? But people,
Mhm.
how do people express their thoughts? It's through their emotions, through their words, and then finally it affects their physical body. So if I notice that they're irritated, they're a little bit angry. It seems like what I feel immediately is that there's this giant bulge around their solar plexus area, which tends to be
Mhm.
the most an energy center that tends to be the most congested, and people might feel maldigestion, right, diarrhea, fatigue, right, because if your digestive system is not working, the rest of the body's not going to be able to function as normally. So that's what I see and feel as the first signs. Yeah.
As you were speaking, I was literally just thinking of the vagus nerve. So, if you're working through the centers from the mind, if it's overactive thoughts that are consistent, down through the heart, if that feels like tension around the chest, or for me, it was palpitations, and then down to the gut, right? Through the solar plexus that you mentioned to the gut, where there's digestive symptoms, also could all be representative of energy that's stagnant, right? Or stuck. So tune into your symptoms. Do not ignore your symptoms. It's your body's way of communicating with you. You are in New York. I'm in Los Angeles, and I'm sure a lot of people after this episode are going to be really curious about finding a teacher or a healer. Do you have any tips for finding a healer, or how to kind of look through what to look for when they're finding a healer?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Similar to like when you mentioned about the supplement industry, I feel like the wellness industry has blown up
Well,
for good
spiritual
and
bypassers.
yes, for good and maybe not so clear reasons. But I would say something that I try to practice and preach is that you want to find someone that has a track record if you're dealing with something serious, of course. And I know there's many gifted healers out there that
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
necessarily have a business and name and social media to have testimonials, but generally speaking, a track record is tends to be very helpful. And the other thing, which is hard, which stems off of the track record, is their character, right? Because as we
Mhm.
understand, where attention goes, energy flows, right? So, for me, working with a healer that has, honesty, that is loving, right, that works hard for your best interests, right, that is also, not too excessive in how they try to sell you something. That's for me, sometimes more important than, how well they can fix someone in 60 minutes, right? Because that's going to be a long-term
Absolutely.
relationship you're going to have. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm finding myself looking for like the sage healers or the mature people who have wisdom and experience in this areas. And as you mentioned, you've had powerful teachers that have helped you guide, in terms of how you work with other people. And for me, it's been the same thing. So I think that the wisdom around that, people who have experience who maybe learned from some really incredible masters out there is really important. I think it's a lot of these ancient traditions, they were able to carry on the wisdom around it by staying consistent with the teachings, the foundations of where it actually came from. So that's a really good point to call on.
And I'll add
And
one thing is that,
yeah,
how you'll find a good teacher or master is that they don't care. So,
they don't care.
but they don't care. They're not trying to sell you anything. So,
Yeah.
so that's for me, the one of the cues, because if they're not trying to push something on you, they usually know their stuff. So, yeah.
Absolutely. You have such a special practice because you obviously look at the person as a whole in every type of body that they have. And can you paint a picture for us that when we truly start to work with whole body healing, mind, body, and spirit, how does that amplify into their life and their movement? You and I are fortunate enough to work with people one on one, and we see so many different parts of their life just amplify, and there's brightness that comes to it, energy that comes to the way that they live. And for me, it's beautiful to watch because it really pulls us back. Often when we're suffering from symptoms, for when you and I were suffering when we were sick, it's a very lonely place to be. We're stuck in our body. We're always thinking about the protocol, what we're eating, what we're doing that's amplifying all of our symptoms. And it pulls us out of the joy of life and even being alive. So, can you share with us, maybe some of the success stories or what you see happen when the person starts to take into account their entire being?
Yeah, and you've probably heard of it too. People on their deathbed, right? And that's when people are
Yeah. Yeah.
finally, um, able to let go of who they thought they were and all their grudges with certain people and certain relationships and partners and exes and children. And I find that spiritual release, that catharsis, right, really allows people, number one, to be in a space to receive, right? Because this goes back to energy work. Energy work is very two simple principles, and it's the same thing for anything that you're trying to do biologically, socially, spiritually. Is number one, you have to be able to receive, right? You
Mhm.
can't force the energy to come in, and sometimes the energy is already there, but you yourself is not allowing it to come into your body, right? Physically, emotionally, energetically, things like that, and so that's number one. With all these practices, all these modalities that I teach about, it's all about making your body receptive, putting yourself into a state of being where you can receive it. Okay, so that's
Yeah.
step number one. Once you're able to receive it, the next part is to use it, to absorb it, right? To make use of the energy or the modality, whatever you're doing. And that's a totally different process because we can see people that might take in advice, right? And but not put it into practice, right? Not actually do it. And that could be physically or that can be psychologically, especially with people that struggle with addiction, right? They might do one thing, but that might only last for so long. And again, this connects back to, for me, that spiritual perspective. I believe that we're here for growth, for evolution, which implies making mistakes, right? Which is perfectly okay. But it's about picking yourself up and becoming stronger. And, love is so much greater than fear. And when people finally open themselves up to that possibility, right, and finally use it to their advantage, I think that's when people change.
It is so good. I often think of if all of us, everyone who's listening, if we could all go back to a time when we were all kids, before any of this stuff happened to us, and we just were these energetic beings playing outside in nature, wearing whatever we wanted, whatever colors we wanted, however we wanted our hair to be, acting, saying, singing, however we wanted to play, bringing more of that energy into our lives every single day just makes it all so much more fun. Takes a lot of the complication away from everything.
And that's what I tell, actually people, Mona, is like, imagine yourself like you were 5 years old, like going through the same things you're going through now, and it just kinda simplifies it for everyone.
Oh
They don't
yeah.
have that baggage, and for me, I'm like, "Ah, I've," even though I'm, like, 31 in this physical body, I still feel like I'm 15. I'm like, "I don't know what I'm doing in the world." I'm still trying to figure it out as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you have so much wisdom, Dr. Jason.
Thank you.
I love this conversation. Can you share the name of your feed or where people can find you?
Yeah, people can find me on Instagram. It's Dr. Jason Yuan, and doctor as in DR. And there you can click on my profile. I have links to different things that I do. I also do interviews. I talk about, science. I write articles, and I really, what I try to do is what you're doing too, Mona, is just to uh, be a credible voice for both the science, clinical, medical community, but also be open to the spiritual aspects of, what, not only what health is, but what it means to be human.
Well, that's exactly what you do. You put the science into spirituality. I think that's why I was hooked.
Yeah,
So I'm happy
so
I
it's
found
working.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's working. It's working. All right, to close things off, we're just going to do a couple more rapid fire questions. Tell me, what is your favorite ancient healing remedy?
Um, as much as I hated it, I had really pungent Chinese herbs when my family was trying to cure me of my eczema. And for as much as I hated it, speaking of the childhood, I actually, it gave me so much more appreciation for some of these herbs because I got to study it again in naturopathic um, medical school. And yeah, because all these herbs, they have not only the physical properties, but the energetic properties. Again, some are more warming, some are more cooling. So yeah, I love herbs.
Oh, me too. I always say there's a joke with a lot of my clients. You're working with Mona if you have an entire cupboard full of herbs and teas to
Yep,
drink.
I'm
One of my
guilty of
favorites
that too.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. When people think about, um, let's say, if someone's walking away from this episode and they want to remember just one thing about energy healing, what do you want that to be?
I think it's the simple saying again that where attention goes, energy flows, and where energy flows, you will see that manifestation physically, emotionally, and mentally. And whether you notice or not, it's happening.
We need that tattooed to our bodies, don't we? To remember. We
Mhm.
just have to remember.
Yep.
If you had to pick one thing about modern medicine that excites you, what would it be?
I think it's the technology and the analytical rigorousness, right? Because we understand
Mhm.
spirituality can be the top down, right? But how do we verify it? So I understand, with conventional medicine, it's really, really good at making things objective and building and scaling it.
Absolutely. So good. Well, I think today, you really own in on the idea that healing, it's not a privilege. It's honestly just it's our birthright. And there's a lot of freedom that comes when we think about healing as a means of our biology meeting our consciousness. And it brings such a sense of ease because we remember who we really are and how we're meant to come into this world actually feeling our best. It's actually our birthright. So thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Mona. It's been a pleasure. And again, I echo that back to you and all the amazing work that you've been doing. So keep it up as well.
Thank you, my friend.